Hello, and welcome back to our last panel for the first day of gridXdays. This one is data protection and cybersecurity, how to keep critical energy infrastructure safe. Joining us online, first we have Jens Thirmeyer. Jens is the business unit lead and solution architect at smapiot. He specializes in delivering customer value across energy, IoT, and IT security. His extensive expertise spans developing sustainable energy solutions, integrating IoT for smart systems, and establishing robust cybersecurity strategies. We also have Thomas Goette. Thomas has served as the CEO of GreenPocket since 2010, driving growth and inspiring teams. He has over 27 years of leadership experience, with more than 14 of those being in the energy sector. He has a deep understanding of market dynamics, and his expertise lie in strategic growth and innovation within the energy market. And I'm very excited to also introduce two of my gridX colleagues in person finally. So first we have Ina Schauer. Ina is the senior legal counsel here. She is a business lawyer who turned her passion for law and business into a profession within both large corporations and small to medium sized enterprises. She has been working in energy and tech for nearly 20 years and has great enthusiasm for standards, processes, and formalities. Same. And then also Dr. Alei Salem. Alei is the team lead for security at gridX, where he focuses on enhancing the organization's security posture and protecting its assets. With a passion for building and breaking systems, Alei specializes in the intersection of software engineering and information security, particularly in areas such as threat modeling, secure coding, security patterns, DevSecOps, and pen testing. Supported by an academic background in AI applications for malware analysis and software protection. So, thank you to those of us joining remotely, and thank you to you two here on the couch. So, we are actually going to start this panel with a question to Thomas. So, Thomas, before we dive into potential security cyber threats in energy, can you talk about the huge potential of leveraging energy data for end users and across the whole value chain, and why this represents such an important shift in an outdated industry?
Definitely, thanks a lot. So we work in this space since 15 years at GreenPocket. We turn energy data into value for our customers, and customers meaning final or end customers, residential ones and corporate ones, and also the utilities and service providers we support with our services. First of all, energy data gives you a very good insight into your energy efficiency measures, your activities, and the potential you have. Furthermore, energy that gives you all the chance to analyze the cost reduction potential you have, and which is much more important nowadays is your carbon footprint and what you have to do to reduce the carbon footprint as a good corporate citizen for an organization. It's quite important. So furthermore, when you look at utilities, they can better improve their processes when they look at energy data in comparison to maybe also production data. It's also for industrial clients very, very important. We see that in so many talks we have with our clients.
Nice. And then, Alei, my next question is for you. According to the European Commissioner for Internal Market Services, in 2023, there were over 200 reported cyber incidents that targeted the energy sector, and more than half of these were directed at Europe specifically. As we know, the energy sector is the backbone of society, and it's what keeps the rest of the industries literally powered up. Mm-hmm. So that's why cybersecurity is so crucial in this sector. Knowing all of this, in your opinion, what are the biggest cybersecurity threats facing decentralized energy systems today?
Right. I think there are a couple of ways that we can actually answer that question. One is to go right away into the technicalities, the threats themselves, ransomware, I don't know, leakage of personal data, etc. But I would rather, since we're focusing on decentralized energy systems, I would rather focus on that very aspect of being decentralized and what that represent as opportunities for attackers. So one is being decentralized means that energy systems, whether individual or clusters of systems, they would need to talk to one another over wide area public networks, basically the internet.
Mhm.
And we all know that once you put something online or the internet, you basically put simultaneously a big target on your back. So we're talking about all sorts of threat actors, from what we colloquially call script kiddies to nation states, what have you. And the second aspect, again, of being decentralized, I think, is these nodes on these energy networks, the people, the individuals, or the entities that actually manage those systems, they're literally individuals, they're families, they're people that maybe they're not really that much into security, maybe they don't really know a lot about it, but whether they like it or not, they do represent an entry point to maybe something that is a little bit more interesting for attackers. A virtual power plant or something like that. And again, at the end of the day, we're talking about just families of owning electric vehicles, PV panels, etc., that are not necessarily interested into or know that much about security. So, in some sense, this aspect of decentralization is both kind of like, how do I put it, kind of a blessing and a curse. But at the end of the day, technicalities remain more or less the same in terms of like what exactly are the threats and attacks against these systems.
Mm. And then actually going off of that, that ties right into my question for Jens, which is how does this increased interconnectivity of renewable energy assets impact the vulnerability of energy infrastructure?
Yeah, thanks. Maybe let's frame it a little bit for the visitors. So when we're talking about renewable assets, I was focusing on the residential ones and the CNI, so the commercial industrial ones. So typically, like Alei said, the ones that are at our homes, you have the PV inverters, but you have also entire HEMS systems that are also connected to some some systems in the cloud, for example. And the thing is that we are getting more and more devices connected from various manufacturers, and we have a variety of protocols out there. On the one hand side, which is the communication inside of the house, is it wired, is it by radio, but also what kind of data is spoken over it. So is it some structured and secure way like eBus, or do we have Modbus or Sunspec, which is really wired and you can attach directly to it. So having more and more devices, appliances, and services connected, it's also an increasing number of dependencies between them. So maybe one device waits for another one, so you have to take care for, and at the end of the day, the entire chain. And so we are looking at typically on three things: on the attacking targets, as well as the attacking vectors, and then what are the countermeasures to it. So attacking targets could be in an industrial environment that attackers try to, let's say, impact the grid stability, for example, but also to get the assets under control in order to blackmail money or something like that. And on the other side, how they will do it, they have a bunch of means for that. The easiest things are, let's kind of a denial of service attacks, right? You take a service out of operation, or try to prevent the availability of the services. But also you can try, if you are more on an appliance level inside the house, you can try to get the your own firmware, an attacker firmware, on the device, and then it acts like he wants to do it. So at the end of the day, there are a bunch of things that might be affected, but there, I think, with some really there are some simple countermeasures. So if you do professional software and hardware development, so if you're using state-of-art technologies, if you're trying to utilize standardized protocols, and especially what we sometimes find even from manufacturers from Far East. Sometimes they try to introduce their own kind of security, and maybe those are more vulnerable than the ones that are already in place by all of the other services. Also, the point is with the interconnectivity of the services, we have to look more on increasing the resilience of the services. So we have a higher dependency, but if one system where I would like to send my data to, or where I'm waiting to receive data, we should be in a stable mode of operation, so that even if the connection or availability is not given, that we still can do our work in terms of service. And the interesting thing is there are a lot of things coming from security authorities, also from the EU, like what we have in Germany, the gridXdays. So NIS2 is coming up, not finally in Germany, but it's not far away. And also the EU Cyber Resilience Act will pay a lot of attention into those topics.
Okay. And then, Ina, considering the risk associated with the growing use of IoT devices in energy infrastructure, what role do you see the governments and international policies playing in improving cybersecurity for energy infrastructure?
Of course, government and international politics play an important role. And just to continue what Jens just mentioned, we're talking not about a German framework. We're talking about an EU internal data market, and cybersecurity is key, of course. So what we're seeing on a legal side now is upcoming new laws in a row, starting certainly with NIS2, plus Cyber Resilience Act, plus Cybersecurity Act, and on a data protection side, also AI Act, and all this stuff coming up, which is hard for legal department, to be very honest, to keep being updated. But on the other hand, there's a clear goal of the European Union or European Commission to set a legal framework and a compliance framework to get the internal energy and data market up and running in a safe and secure manner.
Okay. And then, Alei, how should companies prepare to recover from a large-scale cyber attack on critical energy systems? And can we improve incident response times for cyber attacks on this critical infrastructure?
Right. I think it largely depends. The recovery part, it largely depends on what exactly you're going through. So as we mentioned before, is this something like targeting availability of a system or some leakage of data? But I think one should start with the basics, which one, you need to have a plan. And we usually we call this a security incident response plan, which defines something from the basics of who even responds to these things. What is exactly your priorities in terms of eradication, recovery, whether you do have to also kind of like contact law enforcement, etc. Even some technicalities that you can foresee maybe from domain knowledge or experience that we call run books. If this happens, you do this. If this happens, you do that, etc. And then I think you would want to drill this as much as you can over and over and over, because the last thing you would want to do is execute that plan for the very first time whilst responding to actually an incident. And that, I think, kind of like, it's a good segue to the second part of the question. It's that training that would make you, again, you've seen this before, you've seen something similar to that before, and you're calm, you can actually execute, go over that plan. And then there are the technicalities, of course, in terms of, again, depending on what you're trying to defend against, redundancies in your systems or parts of it that you can actually bring up online as soon as you can. Having early detection solutions is also key, but that would require, of course, kind of like to know what exactly you're monitoring. Where do you put your sensors? What detection mechanisms and alerts are there, so that you can recognize this as early as possible and maybe also kind of recover or just kind of like stop these attacks as soon as you can. That's pretty much it, I think.
And then Jens and Thomas, would you have anything to add to this?
There were some points that I would also noted down. There are two things, like the failover capabilities, the disaster recovery. and also the like Alei said, the intrusion detection. That's also a tricky thing, right? You need to figure out, okay, what are the measures that you find out that there is something happening, something different from what the service or appliance was designed for. So the let's say the unusual behavior of the device. It could be one means that you're monitoring the traffic, the ingoing, outgoing traffic, just as an indication that more happens. But this does not answer the question what really happens. And this just as a note to what Alei said.
So for definitely for sure, we analyze data patterns actively within our DevOps team. So if we see some indications that something goes wrong, we get indications from the systems we use to monitor the traffic. So then we can go into the analytical part of the job.
Okay. And then, Ina, back to you for the more legal side of it. How can energy companies navigate the legal complexities of sharing threat intelligence without exposing themselves to liability or competition concerns?
So first of all, in regards to liability, at the end of the day, it always ends up with compliance, Mm-hmm. And in order to stay compliant, you need to know what's allowed and where the limits are, So as mentioned earlier, we have by far stricter and more rules than ever before in the European Union. This is to secure not only our energy sector, but the entire European internal market, because following the market principle, it means that all players on the European market need to adhere to the same rules. So also inverter companies from China or PV companies from the US need to follow the same guidelines as we in the European Union, which is good for us because from a consumer perspective, it assures the same level of safety and security from a legal, but also from a product safety perspective, for example. And this is for me a major point, that we need to be aware of what's allowed, what are the hurdles, what are the limits, and then from a company perspective, and in order to kind of avoid high liabilities, we need to have transparency in our own company. So having the real experts talking to the right people, get employees aware of what's required and what's allowed and what's not, and think it through, like build interdisciplinary teams to go through the legal requirements in order to find out where to go to, and starting from a product development perspective on how could a new legal requirement affect our product, up to sales, where I need to be able to talk to a customer and communicating new legal requirements on a customer talk as well. It's the entire kind of product and customer journey where we need to be aware of. From a competition law perspective, it's always hard to share too many information. But if we're talking about threats, making something public, for example, there are public authorities like the Bundesnetzagentur, where you can just open up a complaint, for example, approaching them, opening up like a kind of ticket and say, okay, this is what we had, or BSI, for example. You can contact them and say, okay, this is what happens to us. If it happened to us, potentially it might happen to others as well. And therefore use this kind of communication line in order to stay compliant. On the other hand, to get transparency also out in the market.
Okay. And then, Alei, how do regulatory frameworks vary by European country for energy cybersecurity? And what best practices can be taken away from other markets to implement?
Right. I think the legal detail will defer to Ina, of course, but the technicalities, I think, at least within the EU, what I think that when it comes to energy, something as big as an energy sector, my feeling is that usually the laws would come from, or would start from, the EU Commission level, come some sort of like regulation or directive. And let's take, for example, the NIS2 as an example, as we mentioned a couple of times here. they would usually define, okay, what are the industries that are relevant? What are the sizes of businesses that are relevant? Give some abstract security practices or regulations or laws that you should adhere to. But then I think they also give a lot of wiggle room for the member states to interpret and these directives and come up with their own laws that would fit, for example, their own circumstances, the industry itself, there maybe any sort of political agenda or policy or something like this. So we would wind up technically with very nitty gritty details in terms of, like, again, sticking to the NIS2 example, how many hours or the window within which you should actually report an incident, for example, a cybersecurity incident that would differ from one country to the other, the standards that you need to adhere to, this one versus that one, etc. But then at the end of the day, they need to all kind of adhere to these things, because I guess this is how the EU works more or less in terms of like the legalities. Something to get from other member states. I mean, there's so many, but I will go chronologically. I've been recently talking to a cybersecurity incident from France, and he was mentioning something that I think, again, within the region of Paris, Ile-de-France, I think. Excuse my French and how I pronounced it, but I think that region is the local government would support businesses that want to implement something that has to do with security, go for some sort of a certification that they would financially actually help them a little bit with that. And I'm not really aware whether there's something similar there, but it's not in Germany, I mean. But I would very much like to have something. It doesn't have to be financial aid, but some sort of a program that would help, maybe from the BSE itself or from the German government or from some sort of ministry that would help small and mid-sized companies with maybe expertise about how do you go about, for example, being certified or compliant with NIS2 or getting with this within reach of being compliant of the standard. That standard could be, as I said, in monetary aid, expertise, some sort of support in some capacity. That would definitely be something I would like to see.
Okay, and then Jens, Thomas, or Ina, do you guys have any examples?
I know if it's an example because I don't know if it's legal in US, but I think the idea of being not criminalized if you do if you test security from a white hat perspective, like it was discussed. I think that's very interesting, because I think if you want to help and if you just try to find also outside of bug bounty projects some security leaks, then you shouldn't be the one who's blamed for that, right? So that's just what came to my mind when what I heard last time.
Interesting. And Thomas, did you have anything?
No, not in detail right now.
But actually, my next question is for you. When we talk about cybersecurity, data protection, and privacy is always at the top of consumers' minds. What strategies can energy companies use to address privacy concerns with increased data collection?
Yeah, they do it. We work firstly with utilities, and they put a lot of emphasis on security when they select providers like us. So normally, so we do solution selling with our complex software solutions, and this is a long process. If you start with RFI, RFP, and they select providers that work according to severe security standards. For example, we had to deliver our 40 pages IT security book to one of the last utilities when we try to win a deal with them. So it's important they have a stage how they're going to select partners like us. But furthermore, the solution itself should bring transparency to their customers in the solution, in terms of that they give customers the chance to opt out for certain services, to make sure what they shouldn't do and what they should expect. So I think communication is always very important. And what we have to deal with is on a regular basis that our partners or customers they conduct penetration tests, black box, white box testing with specialized organizations that test our software, and then they come back and give us a long list of how we can improve our software, and we have to discuss it all in each of those details. And then if there are areas where we have to improve, then we have to fix it. And I think that is important. If the consciousness for those elements in the selection process of a software or in the daily collaboration is installed in the processes of an organization that buys software like ours, I think that is important.
And then
industrial standards are set, and most of the bigger organizations, they have it in place right now. So it's our standard business. And then GDPR discussions you always have to fulfill, as everybody of us knows.
Yeah, quite a popular topic here. Ina, how can current data protection laws be effectively applied to secure critical energy infrastructure without hindering innovation?
It comes to the point what I was saying before, that for me transparency is key. So when we're talking about data protection, we're not talking about GDPR, just GDPR any longer, but we're talking about AI Act, we're talking about EU Data Act, we're talking about so many laws right now. And from my perspective, innovation is only possible if you are aware of the framework you may create or be innovative in, So when I discuss, for example, with our head of engineering, he needs to be aware of all these new laws about GDPR, the processes behind. So 2 hours ago, I had a call with some colleagues regarding the EU Data Act and the technical implementation of legal requirements. And it was like, how can we do it? And I guess this is the kind of starting point in a discussion, that a legal framework is nothing you only need to be aware of in a legal department, but the entire organization needs to know it, because otherwise you can be innovative as much as you want, but you won't be successful, because if you want to launch an in-compliant product or non-compliant product, you won't have a market, So if you really want to be an innovative provider or producer of solutions, then you need to be aware of your settings, and not only from a technical perspective or from a cybersecurity perspective, but also from a legal perspective.
Okay. And so then actually, I guess from the cybersecurity perspective, Alei, Jens, or Thomas, do any of you have something to add along those lines?
Yeah, I would like to add that that data is always a chance, a potential. So it's not always the best answer to minimize data. I think for many services you need more data, and you need the chance to work with this data. And so we definitely we say, okay, there should be an openness to utilize data, and just implement standards to make this in a secure and well thought manner. I think that is much more important, but not general saying, okay, please prevent any analytics on data, because data gives a huge chance if you work with it.
Couldn't agree more. So data as an asset is the first time EU defines it as it is. And I'm absolutely with you that we need to see that way, that it's not harmful to collect data. We just need to do it correctly. But on the other hand, it could be a very huge potential on all sides of the business, not just from a company perspective, but also for the end users in the energy sector. At the end of the day, we're talking about grid stability, and having more data and better data helps us to get this net stability or grid stability up and running.
And you want to optimize and you want to automate processes, especially if you look at the energy landscape. It's getting more and more decentralized. So you have to, if you want to handle this in an optimal way, you need AI, you need technology to do this better than mankind could do by itself.
That actually ties into one of my questions, which is it's hard to have a panel on cybersecurity without bringing up AI. And today, many companies, as we know, are using AI technology as a tool to help optimize, streamline processes, exactly as you were saying, Thomas. And so while there are benefits to this, especially generative AI, this has also created a new host of threats. So actually, Thomas, I'll ask you first, how do you see companies being able to combat these?
Yeah, we see that for many organizations on a personal level, on a manager level, it's seen as a threat. So okay, too many data. We have to make sure that we are compliant. GDPR was mentioned again and again. So I think there in this process, it's openness, transparency, and clarity of how you're going to work with data. If this is in place, I think then it makes it much easier to convince participants working with energy data that it gives a lot of potential for every organization.
And Jens, what would be your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so we're currently working on some customer projects with especially generative AI. So the thing is, it changes the game, right? So in former times you were used to, okay, I ask a question and I get a deterministic answer. Every time I ask the question, I get the same answer again. So now with generative AI, you get, let's say, a little bit more creativity into the game. So which makes it also harder to test because it is not the distinct yes or no, right? Also, with generative AI, they are capable to, let's say, process a defined amount of information. So if you go below this, so if you have more information, then also those systems try to hallucinate. So even if they do not have the right answer, well, they are very creative. They feel like novel authors. They introduce new players in the game that you haven't asked for, and this is a technical problem, and it could be used on different ways. So the idea is, so usually when you talk about it, everyone uses ChatGPT more or less for one or the other question. So basically what you give is the user prompt. It's called user prompt. So you define your question and then that's sent to an agent. And then the agent says, okay, I need to give some syntax, which is called the system prompt, to give a frame how the answer would be, what information should be considered and stuff like that. There are also some, let's say, prompt injection attacks that say, okay, forget about what I'm going to tell you about my system prompt. Here is what I really want to know. So this means that you can give, due to the, based on this creativity, you maybe expose more information that you're allowed to. So there are many new attacking vectors which are coming into the play, and for example. There was one famous article about you cannot ask how to create a bomb, how to build a bomb, but there are techniques where you can step by step ask questions like, okay, do you know how to break some stone out of somewhere, and then you go step by step by step, and by the end of the day, it delivers you fractions, or at the end as a summary, how you have to proceed. And this, so there are some technologies from the LLM manufacturers called the content filters, who try to capture those and try to work against this, but it could be very tricky on that point. And there are different countermeasures you can do. I think ChatGPT is introducing the JSON mode, so you can define what the outcome looks like. So exactly what kind of structure of data, what is in there, and so on, and it limits, let's say, the spread of possibilities by the end of the day. You can also have where we use, for example, multi-agent approach. You separate the concerns on which you want to achieve with the generative AI into different portions of work, and you have dedicated agents which are dealing with very specific things. And the next things would be, if you want to also introduce the knowledge that you have in a company, but this is not available at ChatGPT or other LLMs, but you want to bring it into. So you have this concept of RAG, so retrieval augmented generation, where you, let's say, put a bunch of documents, throw it into a vector database, and based on this and the technology that is behind, you can you are able to generate information that only your company has.
And then, do you two have any thoughts on AI?
I love it. No, but I mean, to add to what Thomas and Jens actually just said, I think is just you need to first of all just kind of like put things into perspective of where exactly are you using this generative AI in your system. Is it something on a front end that just answers frequently asked questions from public data or public information available, or is it something that you would put in bed as a feature in your system where you, for example, ask, hey, give me how within my zip code, how many or how much do people pay, for example, for an electricity bill from the grid? And then things start to get a little bit interesting, as also kind of Jens and Thomas said, because maybe there's only one house in that zip code, and then you just literally say, oh, that person pays this amount of money. So technically, of course, it adds. I don't really look at it as like this is a very much game changer in terms of like, oh my God, this changes everything that we know about security, because the concepts stay more or less the same. Separation of concerns, I don't know, implicit deny, all of these kind of concepts. But then, of course, there's some knowledge and details, as again we discussed in this panel, that you need to know of in order for you to be able to defend against these types of attacks. But yeah, it's just very exciting. Technology, as usual, adds a lot of advantages, disadvantages. So. Yeah.
So, and we really try to improve our internal knowledge management. I think many companies try to do this because it's not that insecure if you do it like this. First, you test it at yourself, whether it works or not. And then we use AI for productivity means, as also most of the companies internally first. And then we see whether we can really bring it into a product element significantly. That's another discussion.
And then to start to bring the panel to a close, Ina, what legalities need to be considered when using consumer energy data in real-time grid management and maintaining privacy rights?
At the end of the day, it's a summary of all what's been said. We have a European framework, and the European framework is growing. So, from my perspective, when I read through all these laws and new regulations, the European Union has a clear view on how to create, on how to build this new framework. In order to, on the one hand, secure and assure people that their data is safe and that not that there are at least threats as possible. And on the other hand, we're talking about how to get the energy infrastructure up and running. And from my perspective, having a strict and solid legal framework is the way to go. When we're talking about EU Data Act, for example, it opens up a completely new discussion about how data can be used in the energy sector. And when we're talking about technical solutions on how we can provide even more data to our end consumers in order to enable them to judge what they are consuming, how their behavior, what the consequences of their behavior is to the grid, to their own household, to their own behavior, it makes people more aware. And having more transparent information is always good for all involved parties. For us as a company dealing with the assets, for the grid stability from a net operator perspective, to the end customer being able to balance their consume or their usage of energy even better.
Nice. Any final thoughts from Jens, Thomas, Alei?
Not really. I think we discussed it all. I mean, we can talk about this topic for days, but unfortunately, we don't really have enough time. So, yeah, no further remarks from my side.
Great. Well, that brings us to a close for this panel and then close for gridXdays number 1. Thank you to all of our panelists in studio and remote for joining us, and also to our viewers, especially the ones who are asking questions, keeping engaged. I think all of our speakers have really shed some light on the critical topics in the energy sphere today. For everybody watching, please join us tomorrow. We begin at 10:30 a.m. And we will be starting with the panel, Can One Energy Player Do It All? I don't know. We'll find out. So thank you and see you tomorrow.